A12B, function notation. Remember, a function is a special relation where every input has an output. Mathematics developed function notation for two main reasons. We can name different functions with different letters to keep track of them. For example, f of x and g of x. We can shorten questions, like what is the value of y if x is 3? Let's take a look at an example. Two companies, Barking Lot Grooming and Tidy Paws, sell and deliver the same kind of shampoos for pets to veterinary clinics. The functions used by each distributor to calculate the cost to the clinics are given below. Barking Lot Grooming, y equals 5x plus 3, and Tidy Paws, y equals 3x plus 21. To keep track of several functions, it is sometimes helpful and necessary to distinguish between them with a name. This is done by putting equations in function notation. Barking Lot Grooming can use b of x equals 5x plus 3, and Tidy Paws can use p of x equals 3x plus 21. This is so Barking Lot Grooming and Tidy Paws don't both begin with y. What major difference do you see between y equals notation and function notation? Press pause now to write down your answer. The major difference I notice is that you can tell the difference in the companies when it's in function notation. Why do you think they chose b of x and p of x? Press pause now to write down your answer. I think they may have chose b for Barking Lot and p for Paws. The symbol b of x in this problem means the cost of x bottles bought at Barking Lot Grooming. b of 4 in this problem means the cost of 4 bottles bought at Barking Lot Grooming. b of x equals 38 in this problem means for some number of x or some amount of bottles, the cost at Barking Lot Grooming is $38. How could I represent finding the cost of 8 bottles taught at Tidy Paws using function notation? Well, if x is the number of bottles and they want to know how much 8 bottles cost, instead of b of x equals 5x plus 3, we could use b of 8 since we know how many bottles they're going to be buying. Interpret the following written in function notation. P of 10 equals 51. Go back to the Tidy Paws function notation. P of x equals 3x plus 21. What does the 10 represent? Press pause now to write down your answer. Since x is the number of shampoo bottles, then the 10 being in the x place would mean 10 bottles. What does the 51 represent? Press pause now to write down your answer. The 51 would be the cost of the 10 bottles. It's how much it's how much Tidy Paws would have to pay for or sell for the 10 bottles. Parts of the function notation. In here, the f would be the name of the function. So, for instance, we used b for Barking Lot and p for Tidy Paws. That's how we named it. The x would be what you would put in order to find the total of something. The right side of the equation would be the function itself. And the left side, the f of x, or the b of x, or the p of x, would give you the indication of what the output would be whenever you substitute for x. Most people would call this output the y value. You input x, and then you get out a total, and that total would be in the place of y. Now we're going to do some practice. The left side of your paper is a practice with tables, using whatever the rule is. On the left side of your paper, you have a series of tables. This is going to be practice using the rule and applying it to the table representation. So here our rule is adding 6. Normally this would be written in function notation, where if the rule is adding 6, you'd be adding 6 to your x. And that's how you would get your y. Remember, f of x is the same thing as y. We also call this the output. So here when we plug in 2 and add 6, we would get out 8. If we were to plug in 3 and add 6, we would get 9. If we were to plug in 5 and add 6, you would get 11. Plug in 10 and you would get 16. Now, it's a little different whenever you're given the output. Remember, this would be the y value. because you wouldn't be plugging it into the x since it's the y. You would be plugging it into the f of x part and then solving for the x. So that means you're going to have to do some inverse operations. That would give you x is 14. You'd have to do the exact same thing with the 100. So you would be plugging in the 100 for the f of x and then doing inverse operations to solve for x. So our x value here would have to be 94. So I want you to press pause now and try table number 2. The rule is f of x equals minus 15. So remember what that means is you're taking your x and you're subtracting 15. So use that rule to find your output, missing outputs, and your missing inputs. Press pause now. So in order to get these outputs and these inputs, you may have to do some substitution. So the rule is to subtract 15 from your x. So if you're given x, you can just simply do that, and that's how I would get the outputs here, here, and here. Now when you're given the input, it's a little bit different. You can't plug it into the x value. You would have to plug it into the y value, or the f of x. So I could plug in my 115 here, and then I could do some inverse operation in order to figure out what my y value actually is. So that's what I did here and here. On the third table, the rule is a little different. Instead of adding or subtracting, we're now multiplying. So our x value is going to be multiplied by 1.5. So try that on table number 3, hit pause, and then check your answer in a moment. So in order to get these values, I had to substitute my x. In the first one is 1, and I got 1.5. I did the same here, here, and here. To get the input, I would have to plug it into the y value, or the f of x, and be solving for x. Well, the inverse of multiplication is division. So I'd have to divide both sides by 1.5, and that's how I got 5 here. I did the same process to get 11 here. The fourth table is a little different. They don't give you the rule. So I would try to find out if it's addition or subtraction, multiplication or division. I see that the numbers going from the input to the output are going up. So this is either addition or it's multiplication. So first I'm going to see if it's addition. I'm going to do that by subtracting to see if I get the exact same thing between the first two and in the first one and the exact same thing in the second one. So let me subtract 3.75 and 1.5, and I also get 2.25. So that means my rule must mean I'm adding 2.25 each time. So if I were to write that in function notation, I would be taking my x values, adding 2.25 in order to get the other values, and doing the inverse in order to get the input. So press pause now to finish filling out your table and then check your answer. So in order to get these values, I had to substitute my x in order to get the y, and that is how I got 7.25 for this value. I did the same thing here, the same process. I did a slightly different process for the last two. In order to find my x value, I had to substitute in for my f of x value. So I substituted my y, which is 21.25, and then I did inverse operations in order to find that my x value was 19. I did the exact same process for the last one. So on the right-hand side, you're going to be doing more practice. It is critical that you do this without following the video first. If you can do this without following the video, then you know that you're going to be able to pass the assessment on this standard. The only advice that I might be able to give you before you begin is in your graph, it may be helpful to label your y values by 5s and your x values by 1s. So hit pause now, complete the more practice, and then hit play to check your answers. Okay, so letter A, find S of 4. So I started by substituting the 4 in for the x, and I got 32. I went ahead and put it into the table. What does S of 4 mean? Well, I looked back up at the word problem and saw that the t is the time in days. So this must mean that the S of 4, since the 4 is in the t place, that it means 4 days. I then substituted each t value into this equation here to find my S of t value, which could be the y or the s. And then I graphed the function using these points. I went 1, 5, 2, 14, 3, 23, etc. And I saw that it's linear, which makes sense because this is a linear equation. This is an mx plus b form. The b being an intercept at -4, and the slope is positive 9 over 1. When I found t, I substituted the 23 in for the s of t, and then did inverse operation to solve for that. It wanted to know the meaning of this, so this is the interpreting part of the standard. Well, if t is the days, and I got 3, that must mean in 3 days something happens. And if s is the number of people in thousands, then it means that in 3 days, 23,000 people will get swine flu.